So I think we can start, right? So first of all, before going into more details about the lecture, okay? There was a question before the start, and so I repeat the answer for everybody, and for also the ones who are following the course, attending the course by listening to the recordings. Actually, when there's the 3-week interval before the exam happens to be, if the exam date is actually close to the end of the lectures, okay? And basically we don't have any answer yet, but it's always 3 weeks before the exam date, okay? So regardless of the rest that is happening, okay? So just if you are curious, you can have a look at what happened last year, okay? From last year was June the 30th, July 14th, so there were just 2 weeks between one exam and the other during the summer session, okay? But I think there was like 2 weeks and something before the end of the lecture. So after the end of the lecture, sorry. So I don't recall exactly when the lecture ended. I think it was around 13th of June, okay? But anyway, this is just an internal arrangement, so the 3 weeks are just for us, okay? So before, when we arrive at the point at which we have 3 weeks, so 21 days before the exam date, I will publish the text of the first exam. When we are at 3 weeks before the second exam date, I will publish the second text for the second exam, and so on, okay? So it may happen that if the dates are quite close, you might have both the first and the second text published, but of course, I mean, if you wait for the second one, you don't have 3 weeks for the first one, because it will only come later, okay? Okay, so if you have any questions, please ask me during the break, maybe, and so I can answer to everybody afterwards as well. Okay, so there was just some more details about the exam, which is right, of course. So last time, actually, we didn't finish the discussion about the APIs, and you remember that we talked about validation, but actually we didn't implement any validation, okay? So today, before we are going into the next topic, we discuss a little bit about validation. You already have an example here on the slides, and so we'll try to implement the same example more or less in our APIs. You remember last time I implemented in Visual Studio Code some APIs. Actually, I think we started discussing the delete operation, and I provided the code offline after the lecture. Okay, so we have the delete API answer ID, okay, and actually that's what it does. Delete an answer with a given ID, no body for the request, and a response can be okay or some other errors. Typically we say no errors in case the ID doesn't exist, okay? There was a question last time about this. Response body none, I mean, or number of affected rows, it's up to you, okay? Not really useful here, I mean, typically for the client, okay? And so let's see the implementation. Actually, I just gave you the implementation. And the implementation is like this. So up delete, this is the HTTP method, okay? There's a parametric part of the URL, :ID, okay? And we can use this value with rec_params ID, okay? Rec_params is an object. It's created on the fly by Express on the server side when it receives the request. And it contains all the parametric part that we specify in the URL, okay? And then, of course, we need to have a method that goes into the database and perform the operation. And we put it into another file. But here is the implementation. Return new promises, all the other methods. Delete from answer where ID equal to. You remember to use the parametric query, because so we avoid SQL injection problems and so on. And ID, it's just a parameter passed to the function. Remember to use function and not the arrow function, so the keyword function. So you have the this available inside the method in case you want to use it. And this can contain last ID in case of inserts and changes in case of update and delete. Okay. In this case, we result the promise with this value, number of affected rows. So in case there is a row, it says 1. In case there is not, it says 0. But I mean, we don't really care too much. I mean, the important fact that we must handle is just in case if there are any errors from the database. Typically, no errors happens unless you have some wrong query written here. So during development, basically. So going back, we get the value from the result promise. We can return it. So that's the option I chose. You can also return nothing. Let's say res to status 200 end, or res end 200 is inserted by default. That's fine. And let's come to the ID. I mean, we expect the ID to be a number. Actually, I must tell you, I mean, the truth is, actually, we didn't say anything about this, right? Here in the README. You could add it to the README if you consider a README to be a full specification. Otherwise, I mean, just for practice. Okay, so this ID, it's typically created by the database, and with this auto increment that we ask to use, yes, with this database schema. I mean, the database just inserts a new ID, which is a number. So we expect the ID to be a number. Okay. So let's try to insert some code that says it's a number, and we reject the request directly in case there's no number, without asking the DB to do anything. Okay. So let's type a little bit. So. So basically, we need to insert something here, okay? You just have to copy and paste from the slides, basically, right? So I copy and paste from the other computer. It's more convenient, but I mean, check the name of the field you would like to check, and then some method that we need to determine, okay? So let's say delete, right? Just to not to lose too much time otherwise. Like check, right? I think I'm not sure if it's mandatory or not, but in any case, in case you have more than one check, you can have an array. I'm not sure if there is only one. Maybe it takes it also without the array, but I mean, let's try not to experiment too much, because we have limited time. Okay, so check ID. Actually, this check is not defined yet, right? So you might want to go back and import const. What's the name? I think it's express validator. Okay, we decide later what to write here. Require express validator. Okay. Actually, it doesn't work like this now, but let's install the package. So in week 04, that's QA server, should be right? Yes. npm install express validator. Okay. Okay, good. And now, actually, you need to trust me. Soon we will discuss modules, and you can only require or import some methods from a package just with the syntax of the object. So basically, you define an object on the fly and you put something inside, and of course we will we will import the check, and I think the validation result. Okay. So the beauty of installing the package and requiring it before doing all the other operation is that maybe the code, the Visual Studio Code, helps us a little bit, because it digs into the package and looks for the methods, function, and stuff, and helps us when doing things. Okay. So why this color is just not used yet? Okay. So we go down and use it. So you can perform a check, and then actually you should say what to do. Okay. Is this is we say it's an integer, right? Is int, yes. How to use it? Well, actually, either you rely on Visual Studio Code or you just look in the documentation. You click and search for this stuff. Okay, there should be is int. Okay, I would like to show you all these things because of course you can ask ChatGPT and all this stuff, but you need to be able to verify this information, right? So is int, that's a link on the slides. Okay, it takes a string. Okay, options. Well, actually, I mean, we don't pass a string. The string is already included in the check. Okay, and options is an object that contains the keys min or max, and you can assign values. Okay, saying like I want minimum 2, and so on. Okay, in this case we don't need anything, so no, it doesn't print nice. Well, it doesn't matter. Zooming stuff is not always working well. In any case, for each method you want to use, you need to check in the documentation or in some examples and see how it works. Okay, so is int, that's enough for us, and what is missing here is that we don't get the result, right? So how do we know if the check says it's an int or not? Okay, what we passed here, you remember what we write here is just middleware, so it's something that is executed before handling before executing the callback that handles the request. Okay, so before actually handling the request. And what we write here is just we take the result. Okay, that function before, validation result, that's a function, takes a request as a parameter, and errors, yes. Okay, and then we need to inspect this object, yes. If not errors is empty. Okay, we need to decide what to do. What do we do? That's an API. That's a problem. Somebody called us like delete answer / ABC. I mean, just reply with an error. Res, oops. Res dot status. Let's take an error code. I mean, I like the 422, but any 4 something is fine. Okay, 422 is unprocessable entity, so that's something that cannot be processed server side before even dealing with the operations. And then it's up to you. You can end is fine. Okay. Or you can, again, JSON something. You would like to have some formats for the error messages. Errors. For instance, this errors object, so the one here, gives you a list of errors that you encountered during the validation. Okay. Here we just have one validation. If we have more than one, we can have a list of errors that happened. Okay, yeah, that's all. Okay, save. Just test it. Node. Well, nodemon. Okay, I already installed the nodemon. Nodemon index. Okay, how do we test it? Delete 10. Okay, that's fine. Let's try. 200, okay. Why? Well, because, I mean, we didn't test this part. I mean, it was a number, right? But the number of affected rows was 0. There's no item with ID 10 in the database. Let's look at the database. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? And let's try the validator. Close it. Validator is here, right? Okay. ABC. Okay. Send. You see? 4 to 2. That's what we specified before. And then this object is a list of the errors. It's good for debugging at least, and then you decide if you want to keep it for your application or not. If it's something that is useful for the application, you keep it. Otherwise, you can simply log it or even don't care for the exam. Okay? Okay. Ooh, app crashed. That's not nice, right? What happened? Cannot set headers after they are sent to the client. So, okay. So I guess we did something wrong somewhere. JSON. Okay. REST JSON. Let me see the code. Looks strange. Let me stop it. Try again. Yeah, there's some. I cannot say res. Yes, else. Okay. You cannot execute the rest of the code, right? Actually, the rest of the code is an alternative. Okay. Otherwise, we go into the database, we perform the operation, which actually that's the stuff we didn't want to do, right? But the point is that we again say rest status something, but I mean the response has been already decided. We cannot change the status once we decide the status. Okay. Okay, let me try again. You see, the nodemon has reloaded the server code. Okay, we saved and the nodemon has reloaded the server code. And now it's fine. Okay? You just need to try and, once you have a first set of APIs, well, the select, of course, that's easier, the get, and insert, update, delete, so the post, put, and delete. You do these 4 APIs in the lab, and then from there you start to copy and paste and create your APIs, the ones you need for your exam. Okay? So, of course, at the beginning it might be a little bit difficult, but then it becomes simpler. Let's just do a last test. Okay? Like 3. Okay? 3 is something which actually exists in the database. And let's see if it worked, because we tested all the cases without the one, that might work. Sent, okay, number of modified rows 1. Let's have a look at the database. I think we need to open it again. Yeah, you see the 3 is missing. Okay? And then that's the beauty of the SQLite tree, right? So you copy the initial database on the QA, you overwrite the QA, and you have the 3 again. Okay, that's the beauty of using the SQLite tree. That's why we are using the SQLite tree, because when we need to reset the database, it's so easy. Okay, fine. Last point is I would like to show you the post. Okay, I think there's a post. Yes, I already cut and paste the post, but there's no validation here, right? Let's see. Just a little bit more complex validation. Okay. No, this is post API answers. I wanted another one. Let's copy and paste from the solutions that I have, because we don't have so much time. I know it takes time in the lab, but I mean, you're not supposed to work only in the lab, right? So the course is 80 hours in the room and 120 at home. Yeah, let's do the API for voting. Okay, we will only look at the code. Okay. So you remember that we decided to vote. Okay, post API answers ID vote. And last time we decided how to vote. We need to pass an action, up vote, down vote. So that's a JSON object. And we get a response, 200 OK, this unprocessable entity, and 500 something in case of errors. Okay, no response body. We could have returned the new vote. I mean, we don't really care about these things. These are details. The important thing is getting right at the fact that we need to use the post because it changes the status of the server potentially. And that's the code. Okay. So post API answer ID vote as a parametric part, the ID. That's the stuff that changes the vote. So there's no definition here. So again, we need to copy this stuff. Where is the vote update vote answer? Okay. So it's just a query update something. Okay. Just put it here. Let's update answer set score plus something where ID. Okay. So I mean, this solves the stuff very quickly because the database does the operation. That's a possibility. Otherwise, you can select, read the value, and update with the new value. That's fine. Okay. Especially, I mean, this is just +1, but if you have a complex operation to do, maybe you need to use code instead of, I mean, JavaScript code instead of SQL code. Okay. So the point is that we said, you remember here, this we expect all the operations on the database to be performed without interference from external requests. Okay, that's to simplify this mechanism. If you're able to implement them with a single query, that's fine. But if you cannot, as typically will happen during the exam, because maybe we ask to do something more complex. Okay, you don't have to, you know, become mad with DB transactions, rollbacks, and stuff like that. Okay, we just assume this. But for a single API, you cannot use it into two separate APIs because we never know what happens between client and server. Okay, in a single API, it's fine. We have indeed a single API that is the vote and answer, not read the vote of the answer and update the vote of the answer. It just vote the answer, and it does the operation. Okay, so vote answer, and we give the ID of the answer and the vote. And the vote, actually, you see, rec body, it comes from the body of the request, the HTTP request. Okay, so that's something that will be sent here. No, not yet. So we take it here, like send the vote. Yes. Something like this. Send the vote. Put it here. So the request will be something like this. Answer 1, vote. You remember to put the header, content type application JSON. And that's really needed because otherwise on the server side, there should be the middleware. I hope there is, otherwise we add it. Yes, there is. To automatically decode incoming JSON messages, incoming JSON body. Okay, otherwise it will not work. It already happened to somebody of you in the lab. Okay, but of course it's easy to detect, and if you're in the lab, we will help you quickly. Okay, and then we handle the request, and we see the validation. You see. Here we have two validation statements, let's say, two function calls. Actually, this is JavaScript, so actually that's a function call, okay? It just, you know, calls a function provided externally by this Express validator package. Check ID is int, like before, and check vote is in and we provide an array of valid values. Actually, it's just a string. Okay, is in should be there. Again, is in. Yes, it's just before. Check if the string is an array of allowed values. Okay, and I mean that's a possibility to you write your own custom validators, but we say that, I mean, try not to write too much, especially if there is the possibility to use basic types and basic ways of validating which are already ready to use. Okay, and that's all. I mean, it's like before. We need to decide what to do when there is an error. And I think that's the same bug, or else. Okay, try. Okay, and save. Okay, so let's give a try and post answer one vote, upload. Okay, one. I didn't know what, I don't know what was the value for one. Let me open it. One, the vote, the score was 2. Okay, so remember the 2. We try again. Let's see. It's 3, right? No, it's 1. Sorry, we downvoted. Okay, it was downvoted, so just down. Okay, so more or less it works. Okay, what happens if this is empty? Again, I mean, just try. That's the error that we saw before. That's a validator. We didn't go into the database to perform any query, any operation. Okay, so you see that performing the validation is quite quick, right? I mean, if you use this middleware like Express Validator and so on, and we expect you to use these validators, and we expect you to have this validation, formal validation at the exam for your APIs. Okay, not everything can be formally validated. I mean, like if I have an ID, it should correspond to an element in the database until I make a query and check if the ID exists. I mean, I cannot validate anything, but at least I can make sure it's an int, like, okay. Actually, not that, actually this is a string, but the function internally will convert it to an int. I mean, to check if it can be converted to an int, okay? But these are all details. I mean, you learn it while you use it, basically. Okay, so let me commit this stuff. If you have any questions in the meanwhile, I can answer. Otherwise, let me commit this stuff here. So you have it with you. Oh, I forgot to open the. So example validation example. So let me commit it, and then I need to add the identity so I can push. Okay, so it should be there for you in the lecture examples. Right, let me see. Let's check the easiest way. Yes. Okay, so it's there for you, just on the Git, and accessible via the browser and so on. Okay. So yeah, this week you're still in the lab, so tomorrow you are in the lab, and it's still about the APIs, right? Yes, I mean, it's still about validation and this kind of stuff, okay? So you still have a second lab on the API, so you finish your APIs, and then you make sure that you followed all advices to make secure APIs, okay? No SQL injection and formal validation and this kind of things, okay? We spent 2 labs on this, okay? So it's important. It's one of the things that we check most at the exam, okay? Because, I mean, web application, especially nowadays, we have a single page applications. Most of the logic, I mean, I would say almost all the important logic resides on the server side. So So you need to make sure what's happening on the server side, okay? Everything should be clear to you, regardless of the technology. We have JavaScript, it's fine. You can have other technologies, but the logic is always the same. Validation of the parameters and stuff is always the same, okay? And now, basically, we finished with the server, and we start discussing how to handle the client, which will take basically, I don't know, maybe 5-6 weeks, I think. And because it's true, we have a server part, but we have a client part as well. Without the client part, we don't see anything, right? You're still there with the REST client to test your APIs. There is a question, right? Yeah. Yes. The variable vote in check vote. Okay, it comes from the body. Okay, so basically check verifies if there is a parameter either in the rec params, that is the URL, rec body, that is the body of the request, or rec query, which is the variable part of the URL. Okay, if you don't specify anything else, it will look for these places. Okay, so you're right. I mean, vote was not there, right? I mean, it was just a name. It was not a parameter, right? But the parameter was here. Rec body vote, which actually it's what we decided, right? It's what we brought right here in the request. Okay? If we change this one, we need to change that. If we have the same name in params and in body and so on, well, I would say try to avoid it. It's easier. And I think there is a parameter of the check, or there is a check body or check params that is more specific. It only checks in one place and not in all places. Okay, but I must tell you, I don't remember now. Okay, thank you for the question. Any other question? No? Okay, good. So, we'll leave the example here. You have the time to have a look at this also during the lab. Okay, and we move on, and basically we start with the new part. Okay, so we start to talk about the client. Okay, before talking about the client, a small introduction. Of course, a client for us in web application is a browser. Okay, for mobile application can be an app, but for us in this course it will be the browser. Okay, so really basic stuff. Okay, and everything mentioned here will be presented in more details later. So you remember this diagram. This diagram was, user interacts with the client, the front end, typically the browser in our case, that speaks HTTP. The protocol over the network goes to the backend, the web server with some attached database and so on. And we focus here today. So we need to learn a little bit of HTML, CSS, and later on we will talk about JavaScript, DOM events, and the rest that we need to program behaviors on the client. Okay. So that's the browser. Everybody is using a browser nowadays, right? You browse the internet, open Google, open whatever, open website, the Politecnico website, and so on, and you use a browser. Okay, and there's quite a number of technologies involved. There's something for describing the content structure, something for presenting it in the best possible way, and something to interact with the content. Okay, so here that's the part where we will spend a lot of time, because here that's where we program behaviors. Okay, with the language, with the JavaScript. And today we will focus on the first two parts here. Okay, and on Thursday we will start talking about JavaScript in the browser. And then there can be also additional elements like fixed elements such as images, videos, fonts, whatever you might think that are useful to show content on the page. Okay, in the browser. Okay, they are either stored or generated by the server. okay? And we saw the traditional web applications and the single page application and the different approaches. The point is that the browser receives these types of content, and we need to be able to write this type of contents. So very quick introduction to HTML. These links are all clickable, okay? So if you're curious, you read, otherwise you listen to my very quick explanation. If somebody of you already attended classes about web application, I'm sorry, I know I will repeat stuff, but I mean, we need to start from the same common ground. Oops, yeah, 7, okay. So, as a browser, and the content of the web page is described by HTML and CSS, as I was saying before. Clicking on links typically brings the user to a new page, but that's the behavior that we would like to stop in single page application. And actually, we would like to load a new page only if we go to a different website. Okay, that's a modern way of interpreting web applications and websites as well. Interacting with elements in the page may generate events inside the browser, like a click on a button and stuff, and these events will be captured by the code, JavaScript, and typically will change some part of the user interface. Okay, open a menu, send a request, and get the answer, and draw the answer, put something in a list, and stuff like that. Okay, the browser is a complex piece of software. Quite complex. I mean, that's the user interface. You can click inside the window of the browser, and that's a browser engine that basically the parser for all these languages: HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and so on. Well, actually, the JavaScript interpreter is here below, and the rest is, let's say, included here in the browser engine. Rendering engine, it decides once it parsed the content, how to render the content on the page, where to put things, so the layout, the aspect, the fonts, the color, all this stuff. Okay. Of course, it must be able to interact with the network, so the browser is able to use the network. It speaks the HTTP protocol, and it can also have additional stuff that we will not see in this course, like it's able to persist some content. Okay. We will only see a very small part of this, like persisting small pieces of information that are basically the cookies and the stuff that allows us to keep sessions when we will do authentication and stuff like that. Okay, but it can be much more complex than this. Modern browser supports a lot of ways of storing information. There are the browser development tools. We already saw them. You can use them on any website, right? Even the Politecnico website. I mean, we don't have special permission to do anything, but I mean, any, inspect. Any browser has these tools. I mean, not the mobile ones, because of course you cannot do that much with mobiles. But I mean, laptop installed browsers all have some form of tools that allows you to inspect what has been sent by the server. Actually, this is not an hacking tool or whatever. It just gives you access to the information that is stored inside the browser. Everything we see here, it's on the browser side. It's on the client side. So we're not sending a request to the server, whatever. Okay, just seeing inside the browser what is being done. Okay, by the browser. Okay, fine. Yeah, and the browser, when it receives the document, it creates a model of the document. So we will see this better later. Okay, so in short, it creates a structure in the memory of the content that it receives, and this structure will be available for other languages to attach some at certain points, like CSS, to say there are some elements that need to be styled in this way, moved in this position and stuff, or to programming languages like JavaScript. These elements, when clicked, must call this function, and so on. Okay, that's what we are going to see. And this is what is called the document object model. Okay, it's a platform and language neutral interface that allows programs and scripts to dynamically access and update the content, structure, and style of a document. So it's a browser-independent representation of the page. Okay, document object model is focused on the document, and all browsers basically support it. Okay, and then we have a CSS. Second topic for today. Allows the definition of styles. Okay. Indeed, the name is cascading style sheets. Like in word processors, you know, there's a style sheet that size where the heading must be 12 points font. The captions must be italics and so on. Okay, stuff like that. And basically, the concept is the same, but it's just applied to web pages. Okay, and it's quite complex nowadays. Okay, so we will, try to use it, but not too much. And JavaScript, of course. Okay, that runs the code, but we will see it later. Next lecture on Thursday. Okay, and the JavaScript, of course, we will have access to everything. The browser document, so the HTML through the DOM, the CSS, and all events and things that are happening in the page. So basically that's all for these slides. Okay, there are a number of links that can be useful to you in case you want to have a deeper look. But we basically now have a look at the HTML. Yeah, with time. And of course, we are going to only to speak about modern HTML. Everything is modern in this course. We try to speak about the way in which modern applications are created. Okay, so yeah, it says 220, but basically it didn't change that much in the latest years. And that's the history. It was born probably before you were born. Okay, so by this guy that is named Tim Berners-Lee, that worked at the CERN, in Geneva, in Switzerland, where they did the experiments about, all physics and stuff. And basically, it had a problem. It needed to find information around in different, scattered in different servers, and so it invented a language to describe this information with very, very basic stuff, like as we say, title, content, Excel paragraphs, and stuff like that, just to allow an easier interchange of information. Okay, and then this HTML evolved quite a lot. At a certain point, if things get popular, they become standardized. And standardization organizations come into play, and this W3C that you might have heard about is the let's say main standardization organization for the web, the World Wide Web Consortium. And still the HTML evolved, and basically the HTML reached this point where we are today. This is just a logo, okay? It's not just a question mark because we don't know. Just a logo. And HTML5, the difference between this one and the previous one is that it's a living standard. So you don't see .1, .2, .3, and so on. But basically, they update it when necessary without doing releases, okay? And basically, the first, I would say the only version was standardized 2014, so more than 10 years ago, and it was quite a jump with respect to the previous one, the 4. Okay, the XHTML had not that much success. Okay, and today basically it's maintained by this WG, Web Hypertext Application Technology Working Group. It's okay, just a bit of terminology in case you encounter it around. And there's a big change between the HTML5 and the predecessors, because the HTML5 was born with thinking about web application, with web applications in mind. Okay, so it had a lot of elements and things that helps in designing web application. The HTML older version were thought about were thought for web pages. Okay, remember how it started? The guy had to search for information, wanted pages, wanted documents, basically. Okay, didn't want applications. And so the previous one was more about design, and this one is more about simplify user interaction. Okay, good. Also, HTML5 is a quite generic term. When you find around HTML5 means something, but also nothing. Something means HTML, that's a language. Okay, that's a specification of the language, but also it's a set of technologies. Typically, we say that the web application is implemented in HTML5 in the sense that it uses not just HTML, but all technologies related to HTML5. Okay, and here you find quite a lot of them. It's useless that we read all of them. I mean, the only thing is, CSS. But we will discuss more in details this topic later. Since it's a live standard, it's also a problem in the sense that you never know if the browser implements the latest functionalities, right? So the browser changes version, so you update the browser. I did this slide a few days ago, so this should be the latest versions, but you never know if they completely implemented all the functionalities specified in the current version of the HTML5. Okay, so there's plenty of resources in the web where you can check, for functionalities, and it says the minimum version required, I think, for this functionality to be correctly implemented in the various browsers. Okay, Chrome, Edge, Safari, Firefox, Opera, Internet Explorer for those who still need to have to use it, and so on. Okay, just something that can be useful for you at a certain point. Okay, so let's come to the point that is more interesting for us: HTML. We need to learn how to use HTML, and this will be the topic for the lab after this week. Okay. So a basic HTML document is just a text file. Luckily, everything is a text file here, so we don't have to deal with binary formats, at least for now. It's a Unicode text file, so it means it supports different kind of characters and so on, but as usual, try not to abuse this functionality. And then in this text file, basically you have three parts. There's a doc type declaration, just a line. It's very simple in HTML5, doc type HTML. Okay, and then you have nested elements with this syntax that's less than sign and greater than sign. And there are elements that are specified in the standard, and they are nested one inside the other. And you see that the slash something is the way in which you close the element, and the other is just specifying the name. You open the element, and there are two sections. And one is head, and the other is body. Okay, and then you will have other stuff inside, depending on what you need. Okay, so an element is basically a start tag, an end tag with the slash, same as before with the slash, and something inside like attributes and so on, in case you need it. They might be optional. And then there can be also an inner text, like that was sample, I think. Yeah, no, simple. Okay, so you see the A, and that's this inner text between the opened and closed elements, so the start and ending element. Okay. And basically the browser takes this text file and it parses the text file, and it creates a representation in the memory, the DOM that we said before, that looks like this. It's a tree because everything is nested, and so basically the representation is a tree. Okay, and this is done automatically by the browser. Okay. We don't see this stuff anywhere. It's just in the memory. It's like you know about data structures and so on. It's just a tree. Okay, and actually the parser of HTML of modern browser is quite tolerant, in the sense if there are errors, it can handle them quite well. But we will try not to have errors, syntactic errors in HTML. Okay, if we open a tag, we need to close it. If we nest something inside another one, we need to close it before closing the other one, and stuff like that. Okay, but just to tell you why it typically works even if the HTML is not well formatted, because quite tolerant, okay? Because in the past, strict conformance to rules was not that much required. Okay, so the mandatory structure, we say the first line doc type, and then HTML root element that contains the head and the body section. Okay, so the head section is meant to represent metadata information. Okay, title, other metadata, load external resources needed for the whole page and so on, like the style sheet. So the for presenting style and the layouting style and so on. And the body is actually the actual page content, so where we write the text and we put the stuff that we want to show. Okay, while the head is not meant to be shown, it's meant to be interpreted by the browser. Okay, so like title, you see title, and okay, that's not the title of the page. It's some information for the browser. If you put title here, it appears on the title. No, we don't have it anymore. Well, it doesn't matter. Yeah. You see, that's the title. That's a tab, right? So that's what is written here. That's outside the window. Okay. So it's metadata information. It's not what appears here. What appears here is in the body. Okay. We can see it again. I mean, you see the doc type HTML, so it's HTML5. And then we have HTML head, okay? And the head, you see, it doesn't mean anything here in the page, but the body, it's everything, right? Yeah. Yes. Well, it depends on where you touch, but anyway. Okay. I'm showing this to you because so you can experiment a little bit with different websites, the website you like, and so on. Okay, so HTML elements are semantic HTML tags, so semantic elements. So they define a meaning of a portion of a document, except for a few ones that we will see during the explanation. So basically, we are saying what is contained in terms of semantic. There's a heading, there's a paragraph, there's a table, there is a list of things and so on. Okay, so the basic type is the text. For the text, you just have to write text, but then if you want to give some semantics to some parts of the content, you need to use this text. Okay, and they will be rendered graphically depending on the style sheet that will be applied by the browser. Like the heading has to be blue, in color blue, I mean, it will be made blue and so on. Okay, but that's independent of what you write in the content. Okay. Example of semantic HTML tag, title, H1, that's the header of level 1. Then you have the subheading and so on, body, etc. Image, whatever. And there can be other non-semantic HTML elements, okay, which are not related to presentation, but just they are useful sometimes to identify parts of the content, okay, like this div span that we will see quite a lot later. There are we can make a classification of HTML elements on the basis of some properties, like this classification on the basis of categories, but I mean I wouldn't then go into so many details here because it's just really definitions which are once you are able to use HTML, I mean you just don't really care about that much. So of course you need to make a heading, sometimes you need to make a paragraph, and then you need to let's say specify that some part of text are particular because you want to highlight them and so on, and you need some text to mark them. Okay, so that's basically the idea. So I mean I report this text here because you might encounter them quite a lot, like HTML5 introduced this article tag, SI, nav, section, header, footer. I mean, that's a classical style of a web page. Okay, so basically HTML5 draw from what typically developers did and do to develop web pages. Okay, so typically you have an header, typically you have a footer. If you don't have it, just omit it. Okay, and then you have heading that helps you to make things ordered in the page. So there are a few tags which are highlighted in bold that are probably the most important ones. I mean, it's not a recommendation to use them for the exam. I mean, I don't really care about the exam. From this point of view, I mean, I expect you to be able to write a very simple page where, I mean, there can be an header, a menu, and something in the middle. And I mean, the application for the exam is really simple. Okay, so just, you know, to give you an overview of the HTML and to let you know that in case you need to mark something in your document, maybe try to find a meaningful element that conveys the meaning of what's inside the element. Okay, if the main page is probably the article, if a navigation bar is probably better to use a nav, and so on. Okay, just, you know, for clarity, it's just a matter of clarity. So this is the typical conceptual layout. Conceptual, that's important, okay? Because if you take this one, you put into a text file, you open with the browser, it doesn't give you this layout, okay? That's just a concept, okay? Header in the top and footer in the bottom, okay? Because the actual layout depends on the browser defaults plus the CSS rules. If there are no CSS rules, there will be a browser default, which is typically very ugly, very bad, okay? Because nowadays everybody uses CSS, so I mean, basically browsers don't care about the default behavior, okay? And then grouping content, the paragraph is probably the most important one. Unordered list, unordered list or ordered list, automatically numbered by the browser. The div is important, has no special meaning and can be used to make a box basically, because you want to put inside something and the box is invisible and you want to treat it as a single element, okay? It's like a bag where you put tags inside, okay? And then there are other tags, I think the red ones, yes. Can you see the red? Yes. Which are important, like that's the anchor, that's the way in which you make links, okay? Even though we will make links differently in the web application, but then IMG for images. I mean, the web HTML 1.0 had images, okay? So it's there has been there for quite a long time. And then some, you know, elements that you would like to emphasize, like M means emphasis, so typically rendered in italics, but it doesn't really matter how it's rendered because that's a default way in which it's rendered and we can change it with the CSS. And B, you want to make it bold, but I mean, it's just another way to make, to mark some part of content, okay? And there's a generic tag as well here, span, which is different from the previous one. The previous one creates a box, and this one just marks text in line, okay? So the start and the end of a block, of a part of a text, not a block, a part of a text, okay? Like you want to delimit some part of text, you put a span in the beginning and slash span in the end, and then you can operate on that text, okay, more easily. And that is transparent as it was the div before, okay? These tags are typically formatted left to right, so in line at wrap at the end of the line. While the previous one, there were basically, I didn't write it, they are boxes, okay? So they are rendered one after the other, one on top of the other, okay? Unless there is some layouting mechanism that changes the behavior, okay? There are also interactive tags like button, okay, or input. Input is quite flexible one. It's the first one that was used there. So it has an attribute type, button type, text type, password, and so on. We will see it later when we talk about forms. I mean, later in the course. Text areas selected to do, you know, menus and stuff. Okay, and of course the A is also interactive because if you click, you link and go to a link. but actually it's not that useful for our application because we don't want to go to a new link. It means reloading the page, and that's what we don't want to do in single page applications. Okay, tables. Well, table might be important, so you know they are a way of presenting information by structured way. So it's worth you know, learning how to use it. It's not that difficult. I mean, you open the table, can you have table head? Can you group you know, some parts like to like the body, the head, and so on, and you have table rows, table data, and table H heading. Okay, and again that's the default behavior. Okay, and you can still change this appearance, the way in which the tables appears again with the CSS. Okay, but if you want to have a table, of course you need to know that you should use a tag table in HTML. Okay, it's a bit different from a list, right? A table is a grid, and while a list is just like a one-dimensional, I mean two-dimensional table, but there is just one column. Okay, so just one direction. Okay, HTML attributes may have HTML elements may have attributes. Okay, so we saw it before. HTML, there was well, let's see the example. Input type text, input type number, and stuff like that. I think in the I mean in the page we have the, you know, body class, HTML, prefix, div ID, and so on. Okay, they are attributes. Oh, yes. Okay, they are just key equal to a value. Okay, often the value is between quotes. Okay, I mean the good syntax, HTML syntax says to put it in quotes. It's better to do it. Again, the browser are quite tolerant, as I told you, and sometimes if you don't use quotes, they interpret them correctly as well. There are attributes which are quite special because can be used on any HTML element, and they will be quite useful for us for the second part of the lecture. So there is a class attribute. You saw it just before. I mean, everything seems to be class, right? Either div or class. Yeah, but that's because they are used in the CSS to handle you know, styles and stuff. So class can be a space separated list of strings without spaces, of course, and basically represent all the classes that these elements belongs to. So it's like the styles that we would like to apply to this element. Okay, class table, class table style. Okay, or paragraph class normal text, paragraph class important text, and stuff like that. ID, on the contrary, gives you gives the HTML element a unique identifier. Okay, so this string is supposed to be unique inside the document as value of the ID attribute. Okay, so there should be no other elements inside the document with the same value for the ID attribute. Okay, so basically it's used to identify a specific element inside the whole page in a quite quick way. Okay, because you get the element by ID. There's just one element that has that ID. If you know the ID, you get the element without looking at where it is and so on in the tree that we saw before, etc. Okay, and there is a third attribute that is worth mentioning here, style, and the value is actually a small piece of CSS specification. So again, it's a string, and it can help you to pass a style, so to use a style for a certain specific HTML element. But I mean, it's to be used sparingly. It means try not to use it. Okay, just, you know, to make experiments and tests. But I mean, it's better to avoid it because we would like to have a style that is not written inside the HTML document, but it's in a separate file, and it's kept separate because conceptually it's something separate, okay? The style sheet and the content, because the style sheet can apply to different contents, right? Okay, if you put it into the document, I mean, it loses the meaning. There are these two wildcard elements, div and span. We already saw them. One is block level, so it defines a block, and the other is inline level, so it identifies a piece of text, basically. Okay. No predefined semantics, so they have no meaning. I mean, basically, they're just used to mark portions of the HTML that will be later handled by some other ways, either by code, JavaScript code, or by the CSS. Okay. As you saw on the Polito website, right? So div, it's full of div, right? So, I mean, the modern websites are mostly like this, and they have a class. So basically, the class then it will define how this block will appear, will behave, and will show, and so on. Okay. So per se it's invisible, and okay, just remember it's display block or display inline. I mean, it's later. It's a CSS properties to decide how to make the layout. So one means basically starts on a new line and it's a new block. It's always on a new line, and the other one instead it doesn't start a new line. It just goes left to right, and if needed, it wraps and it goes to the next line. It's like text. Okay, that's why it's called inline. Okay, so at this point, you have two different ways of defining the content of your document. You can use the HTML5 proper HTML elements, header, nav, aside, footer, article, etc. Or since we have these wildcards, could even do something like this, div, and so on, and give actual attributes with some meaningful values that are later taken by the CSS or the JavaScript code and will make the element behave as we expect. Okay. So this is just a way in which I mean, it's a philosophical problem. I mean, it's a way in which we would like to write our content. I don't want to say one is better than the other. It's more or less the same. I would say this is more the inheritance from the past, where they didn't have this specific tags, okay? But it's just a matter of deciding what you like, okay? Because in terms of appearance, and so in terms of rendering and how they will behave and so on, basically they are all the same, because without any CSS rule, so basically without any information about how to style them, they behave the same. Okay, so they have no default. I mean, they have really bad default behavior, one on top, one above the other, and you don't get anything meaningful. Okay, so I mean, this is really conceptual stuff. Should I use an article or a section or an aside and so on? I mean, there's plenty of resources in the web that tells you, how you should work. But in practice, any meaningful way of using these elements is good for our purposes. Because, again, the behavior will be defined later, not because you used a certain tag like nav, article, etc. Okay, so yeah, I mean, that's up to you, really. I mean, we will do really basic stuff. Once we have a template for our web page, for our web application, that's enough for us. Okay, we are not dealing with this decision of should we use one tag, the other, and so on. It's more like a philosophical question we are not interested in. Okay, but as you see, there are plenty of places where they tell you what is the supposedly good way to do things. Okay, One thing you might find useful are validators. We say the HTML has to be properly formatted, so HTML elements need to be correctly nested and so on. There should be only the attributes that belongs to that element, etc. Sometimes it's a bit difficult to verify that all these properties are satisfied. Also because I told you, the browser are quite tolerant. So the fact that you load the document in the browser and something shows up, it doesn't mean the document is very well formatted, okay? Because they are very, very tolerant. And so there are these HTML validators that basically tells you a lot of things about the document. Well, of course, if there are major errors like nesting problems and so on, that's a major error, and of course that will be pointed out. But also minor things like this attribute is not supposed to be used with this element and so on, but actually every browser supports it and so on. So this is more about checking if your document is compliant with the formal specification of HTML. Sometimes it might be useful for debugging, but I would say probably not that much, because again, Visual Studio Code and these tools will help us to achieve the proper nesting of the elements. They understand HTML and CSS, so I mean, it's really unusual that you can write something that doesn't really work as you expect, okay? But in case you need, you can always check. These are useful, for instance, to check accessibility and stuff like that. When, I mean, if you have problems, there are users that have problems in seeing the content, they use screen readers and these kind of things. And so a very well done document should support some sort of hinting and help these users to properly read and access the content. And these validators are quite useful for this purpose, okay? But again, this is outside the scope of the course. So for our course, it's enough that we have a reasonably formatted document with reasonable text. I mean, if you are unsure, div, paragraph, span, tables is probably more or less enough, okay, to format our document. And yeah, and I think that's all for HTML, okay. Of course, you as usual you find a lot of links where you can have more information. And unless you have questions about the HTML, I would say we can stop here for the break. And after the break, I will prepare a short demo. Okay, so I actually already put online in week number 5. There's a small HTML document, and we can have a look at an actual HTML document loaded in the browser as well. Okay, but experiment a little bit. Okay, are there any questions? It seems not. So let's break for 10 minutes or more or less, and later we experiment with HTML and talk about CSS. Okay, see you.